So tier 2, so some, like, as I said before, once we've implemented tier 1 interventions, you know, that's going to be all we need to support pro-social behavior in the large majority of kids in a school. Even if we don't start out there, we'll get there, right? But some kids need a little bit more support than tier 1. So now, in addition to tier 1, for those kids, we implement tier 2 interventions. This isn't instead of, this is on top of. Look, on top of tier 1, we have tier 2, okay? And tier 2 interventions have increased structure, increased frequency of feedback, in particular positive feedback. There is some social emotional skills instruction that goes around along with most tier 1 interventions, frequent opportunities for success and recognition, and if necessary, academic assistance. Because for many students, as you well know, behavior problems are related to academic failure. Right, and academic failure may have to do with missing skills. I mean, you can't learn to read if you've never learned phonics. You're never going to be good at reading if you don't know the code. So if some kids didn't learn the code, right, I don't care what you do down the road, they're never going to be fluent readers. So if we need to go back and teach the code, teach phonics, then we may need to do that for some of these kids so that they're not having behavior problems during language arts instruction anymore because they're so frustrated because they can't read, right? I mean, so there may be some additional support required academically. There are a number of different systems that have been set up and researched in the literature that are tier 1 systems. The one that I'm going to talk to you about today and show you is called the check-in, check-out system. But in some schools, they don't do CICO, they don't do check-in, check-out. They may have a homework club for kids after school who need support getting their homework done. They may have a friendships club after school. They may have social skills groups during school if there are a bunch of kids who need some additional social skills instruction. But this is basically additional group-based, not particularly individualized instruction that's layered on top of tier 1. So they're usually designed, tier 2 interventions, to be efficient but not individualized, right? Efficient but not necessarily individualized. The individualized interventions are at the tier 3 level. Right? So let me talk to you a little bit about check-in, check-out, and also show you a little check-in, check-out video. Check-in, check-out is not the only option here, but it's the one that I've chosen to focus on. So check-in, check-out adds mentoring by an adult in the school who looks out for the student and is the primary checker-inner and checker-outer. There's a structured process of feedback and recognition in a school day, particularly recognition for pro-social behavior, that's more frequent than in tier 1. There's instruction in needed skills, there's homeschool communication, and there's a built-in monitoring system for student progress. So often what happens in a check-in, check-out system is students at the beginning of the day check in with the designated person and are given a sheet that might look something like this, right? Here are the school mottos: be safe, be responsible, be respectful, right? And the codes here are 0 means it needs work, 1 means it was okay but not as good as we'd like it to be, and 2 means, wow, you just really did that, right? And in this one, this student is checking in the morning, before recess, before lunch, after recess, and at the end of the day. The student and the mentor set a goal for how many points. So here's the goal of how many points I want to get. Here's how many points I actually get, and there's some kind of system of reinforcement at the end of the day. So it's like a tracking system for that. And then the student takes home a report. This is the homeschool communication. I met my goal today. I had a hard day. One thing I did really well, something I'm going to work on tomorrow. Here's the comments. Every day the student brings home the report. The parent gets to have a report about, you know, how the day went, signs it, the student brings it back in the morning, gives it to the mentor, and they start all over again. Okay? So the cycle for check-in, check-out is morning check-in, right? Morning check-in, and then at the end of every class period, at the end of language arts, at the end of math, at the end of science, the teacher, and it may be the same teacher for each of those, or it may be a different teacher, checks, how did you do? How did you do? Rates the behavior, right? Right, that goes on at the end of every class period. There's an afternoon checkout at the end of the day with the mentor. There's the home check-in with the parent, and then there's a morning check-in, and they start all over again. So the idea is that the student is learning to self-monitor his or her behavior, self-manage his or her behavior. The whole thing is designed to be primarily reinforcement of pro-social behavior, not, oh, you screwed up again, oh, you screwed up again. Right, like that, the emphasis is still on the positive part of the equation. Now for our kids, the challenges with check-in, check-out could be many. First of all, the expectations might not be clear, the rating system might not be understood, the check-in intervals at the end of each class period might not be frequent enough, the check-in period with the mentor, that is at the end of the day, usually might not be frequent enough, and the reinforcement at the end of the day might be too delayed, so there might need to be some adjustments. So let's go back to this example of a typical check-in, check-out sheet. Be safe, be respectful, be your personal best. These are the school rules. And here are the behaviors that we're looking at. Here are the different class periods, right? For many students with autism, this is kind of not going to happen very easily, right? So I might want to, for some students, set up a system that looks more like this. Okay? So here are my hands, feet, and mouth to self, be kind to others, raise hand and wait, do your work. So I'm using visual supports. And instead of a 0, 1, 2 system, I have a you did it, you didn't do it system. That again is visual, right? How many happy faces do we get? How many X's do we get? Which one did we get more of? The teacher initials it. So I've basically used the same idea, but now I've adapted it with visual supports. Right, and for many students, this is going to be much more transparent, much easier to understand, and by the way, they've got some pictorial images that remind them of what the rules are here, right? So with the student who doesn't read or doesn't read well, they've now got hands and feet to yourself, be kind to others, raise your hand and wait, and do your work, right? So we may need to make those kinds of adaptations for some kids. We might need to individualize the, I just did that one, sorry. We might need to adapt the system. We might need to have them check in more often. So instead of at the end of the period, as you saw Kendall do, we might have some students check in midway through the period and at the end of the period, right? Because they need more frequent feedback. Oh, wow, you're doing really well. Yes, you're being respectful. Yes, you're being responsible, so forth and so on. We might need to provide explicit reinforcement at the end of each period, not just at the end of the day, right? So there may be some kind of tangible reward, some kind of activity reward, some kind of other reward. Okay, wow, you got all your points for this period. You know, you get 5 minutes on the iPad before you have to go to your next class or whatever, right? Again, everybody has to agree that this is a good idea and that it's worth it to provide this extra reinforcement for the sake of supporting the student around reduction of problem behavior. We might need to decrease the number of points that a student needs to accumulate in order to earn the reinforcer. So we don't expect perfect days. I'd be happy with this kid here if, you know, half of his periods were 100% successful, because right now 0 are 100% successful. I'd be happy if half are, and then 2 weeks from now, 60%, and then 2 weeks after that, 70%, and we gradually increase the criteria for what a successful day looks like. Right? So there's all kinds of ways of adapting, even something as, potentially abstract as a check-in, check-out system to accommodate the needs of students with autism and other developmental disabilities. This fits right into, by the way, what Eileen talked about this morning when she was talking about contingency contracting. This is basically a contingency contract with a portable system that students can use to keep track of and to allow staff to keep track of successful chunks of time.